We're joined now by J. Christian Adams, author of Injustice, exposing the racial agenda of the Obama Justice Department. Thank you so much for being with us, sir. And you wrote an article on PJ Media, and that's what we want to talk to you about tonight. Cameron?
Before we go on, Christian, talk about we're very glad to have you on because the title of your book is so indicative of this New York Times article. So before we talk about the article, talk about your book and talk about the thesis of the book, and then we can go on to this article from Charlie Savage in the New York Times over the weekend.
Sure. The book is called Injustice, Exposing the Racial Agenda of the Obama Justice Department, and that's exactly what it does, is because race infuses this Justice Department's policy decision-making and its public pronouncements about its activity. The new Black Panther case, the dismissal against the voter-intimidating new Black Panthers was just the tip of the iceberg. And I really start the book with a quote that Holder has been carrying around in his wallet for 40 years from a Harlem preacher that talks about how race is everything, that the black attorney, U.S. attorney, has common cause with the black criminal. And you simply cannot view the actions of this Justice Department without looking at it through the lens of race.
All right, so to bridge the book to the article, you talk about Charlie Savage in your book.
I do, because when Savage won a Pulitzer Prize for covering the Bush Justice Department in the last administration, here at PJ Media, we did the exact same thing Savage did, except we did it to the Obama administration, and we did it better. In other words, we exposed how they hired 113 radical attorneys in the Civil Rights Division at Justice. Savage only talked about 10 or 11 attorneys and managed to win a Pulitzer Prize. And so I talk about his shenanigans in the book.
When you talk about radical, give us some examples.
People who work for groups like the Junta for Progressive Action, people who led the Queer Resistance Front. I'm not talking about liberals or Democrats. I'm talking about people who are on the far fringes of American political thought.
Because you would expect the Obama Justice Department to hire Democrats and left-leaning people, but you're saying they're so beyond the pale that is to be just unacceptable.
Oh, yeah, exactly. They hired people who fought against proving that only U.S. citizens were registering to vote in Georgia. I name names in the book Injustice. Elise Shore is the person I'm talking about there. And so these are not just liberals, these are not just Democrats, these are outright radicals.
Okay, so you are definitely not afraid to name names, but let's go to the article now where Attorney General Holder says that arguments against him are driven by racism, and because he is seen as one with President Obama, that people who are against him and his agenda are naturally racist. And without naming names, of course, but just respond to that first of all.
Well, it's disgusting, and it's also totally expected from this crowd to cover up and to excuse their behavior in Fast and Furious because of race.
What you were down there in Austin, Texas, where the article was written in, and you were even just the points about how many protesters came, because you spoke at this rally against Eric Holder, and even the article says that there were fewer people than you even saw there.
Well, once again, it's why you can't trust the New York Times anymore to report on anything. Charlie Savage at the New York Times in the article says there were half a dozen people there to protest Eric Holder. In the same article, the New York Times has a photograph where there's 18. So even they have internal inconsistencies on the reporting. But I was there and counted 127. You just can't trust the New York Times with anything, particularly covering Eric Holder and Fast and Furious.
But you also have a history here where Attorney General Holder says we're a nation of cowards when it talks to race. Now he's blaming, especially us here at NRA News, because we talk about this on a nightly basis. He's calling people, and when you think about all the people on Capitol Hill who are calling for his resignation, you're talking about some of the presidential candidates saying he should step down. So he's saying that all these people are racist.
Yeah, look, this is what scoundrels do. When they want to take away your liberties, you look at history. It's no different than what's happened in history. When other people from the state have attacked liberty, they always find ways to make their critics look worse than they really are. And so this is just the same template we've seen played out for hundreds of years.
This is also a Justice Department that is very actively fighting against immigration laws such as the ones in Arizona and in South Carolina. You look at what has been said recently about voter ID laws. You look at what Thomas Perez from the Justice Department has said, and their arguments against Sheriff Joe Arpaio there in Maricopa County in Arizona. The pattern here is just, it's pretty scary.
Well, one of the parts in the book that's most important to understand is the Justice Department is the single most powerful federal agency. They are the epicenter of all other policies. So if you can infest the department with radicals and radical policies, you really move an agenda. And in the case of this Justice Department, it involves breaking down borders. It involves inviting illegal aliens into the country. It means stopping Georgia when they want to prove that only citizens are registering to vote. And it means doing crazy things when it comes to guns and Fast and Furious. I mean, this is not the Bill Clinton administration. This is a new breed of radicals that are in charge of this Justice Department.
You know, we have a lot of people who are going to listen and watch this here at NRA News, and they're going to be very concerned about this, of course, and they have been all along about Fast and Furious itself. But when more and more of these stories come out about your limits on your freedoms, and you know, some people support the laws. You know, SB 1070 in Arizona was there for a reason, because people support it. And you're talking about federal oversight and people wanting to go in and change locally elected laws. I mean, is there, other than people just sitting there being nervous about it, writing about it on blogs, what can people do to fight this?
Well, the Constitution has the answers on that, and the first thing you can do is get educated about it. And if you're listening now, obviously you're interested in learning. There's lots of information out there. I mean, I literally wrote a book on it. And but what you do after that is let your congressman know. They care. They really do. When they start getting calls and letters saying Holder needs to be impeached, they might not impeach him. But I'll tell you one thing, they're going to treat him a whole lot differently the next time he's up in front of the committee, the next time he wants money for something. Washington moves on the margins, and people need to understand, just because Holder isn't dragged out to be put in irons doesn't mean that they can't do something about it.
We're speaking with J. Christian Adams, author of Injustice, Exposing the Racial Agenda of the Obama Justice Department. Mr. Adams, let's talk a little bit. You mentioned Fast and Furious, and obviously a subject that we're following closely here at NRA News, as you know. Let's talk a little bit about that with the recent stuff coming out about the allegations from Attorney General Holder and the President about the race being behind, you know, them going after the Attorney General. Does this sound like desperation to you? Because, you know, people are really starting to get on him with Fast and Furious?
Well, it is so outlandish, the accusation that racists are driving the criticism of Fast and Furious, that it's hard to really know what they're up to. Either this is a brilliant scheme to both get rid of Holder, get him to resign, as well as activate their race-motivated base. I mean, that's one outlandish possibility, or this is just complete incompetence. This is a detachment from the American people on issues of race. They think that everybody's racially aggrieved, and therefore when they throw something out like this, people will just eat it up. It's really hard to know, because it's so crazy and so demonstrably false that it's really hard to know what they're up to.
Do you worry about this diminishing real, true racial claims and actual fact? You know, there is racism, of course, and sometimes there needs to be some sort of legal response to it. Do you worry that this dilutes that?
Well, there's no question that they have done a great damage to race relations with this administration. What was such a great opportunity in 2009 to bring healing to this country, they've completely blown it. They blew it over and over again, whether it was the Black Panthers or this latest episode, in claiming that only racists are motivated by Fast and Furious criticism. I mean, it does diminish good faith discussions about race, because they've just thrown gasoline on the fire.
I'm intrigued, Mr. Adams, by you're talking about just how radical of a Justice Department this is. And for those who aren't as familiar with your book as some of us, let's talk a little bit about that, because when you get into this, you start to get under the surface. It's pretty crazy, huh?
Well, I mean, look, there's so many areas. Just let me give you two examples of radicalism that are in my book, Injustice. One is they brought a lawsuit against a school district in New York because there was a boy dressing up like a girl. He was wearing high heels and a mini skirt and a pink wig, and they actually went in and sued the school district and said, you have to let him dress like this, and you have to spend $75,000 on gender questioning counseling.
Oh, boy.
Okay, I discuss it in the book Injustice. It's Mohawk United School District. Or here's another example. They're not enforcing the law that requires you to remove dead people from the voter rolls. How convenient, before 2012. But they are enforcing the other part of that same law that forces states to register people in welfare agencies and drug treatment centers. And they have radicals in charge of these policies, and they're leveraging the power of the Justice Department to gain political power.
Last question, Mr. Adams. The thing that gets me personally is these sanctuary cities. You're talking about cities that are outright breaking the law, but no one ever goes after them.
And nor will they. There is a pro-illegal alien philosophy inside this DOJ that I write about in detail in the book, where they actually go after states like Arizona, like Alabama, on a full aggressive attack on whenever they try to do something about immigration. And here's the worst part about it. They just don't use immigration laws when they go after these states. They use voting. They use federal funding issues. It's like the whole armada of power is unleashed whenever you attempt to crack down on illegal aliens.
Wow. A lot of great stuff here. J. Christian Adams, author of Injustice, exposing the racial agenda of the Obama Justice Department, and he's writing on PJ Media, too, about how the New York Times and Charlie Savage lie. Mr. Adams, thank you so much for your great work here. Thank you for getting the truth out, and thank you for talking to us about it here on NRA News. We appreciate it.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.